The Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus, Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Assemblyman Joel Jack, Secretary of Finance and Enterprise Development. Ms. Jennifer Daniel, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Mrs. Claire Davidson Williams, Administrator, Division of Finance and Enterprise Development, Tobago. Mrs. Marcia London McKellar, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Ms. Shanmati Singh Ningsang, Deputy Permanent Secretary, Acting Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Ms. Sangeeta Bundu, Senior Legal Counsel, Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Mr. Carol Adams, Commissioner for Cooperative Development. Ms. Jacqueline Job, Cooperative Officer 3, Cooperative Development Unit, Tobago. Mr. Joseph Remy, President, Cooperative Credit Union League of Trinidad and Tobago, and other representatives of the cooperative and credit union movement. Dr. Ralph Henry, Chairman of Kyrie Consultants, other specially invited guests, fellow staff members of the Cooperative Development Division in Trinidad and the Cooperative Development Unit in Tobago, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Can't remember a longer salutation list in a long while, but welcome to you all. Welcome, the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development and the Enterprise Division of the Tobago House of Assembly are pleased to co-host this National Cooperative Sector Stakeholder Consultation here in beautiful Tobago. This is the third and final day of this phase of our national consultative process. It's the first phase of that process, and that process is toward the development of a national cooperative policy and the enactment of modern, effective, relevant, and progressive cooperative legislation. As you would understand from our agenda, we have a packed schedule for today because we've combined both the review of the national policy that is in existence and our discussions on toward a new policy, and also the legislative agenda in terms of the enactment of new legislation. So we are going to be pressed for time today, so allow me to introduce our first speaker, who is our Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, Ms. Jennifer Daniel, to address you and to deliver the welcoming remarks.
Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus, Assemblyman Joel Jack, and other members of the head table, ladies and gentlemen, welcome. And though the remarks are welcome remarks, it's ironical because from the time we came in this morning, I have been made to feel very welcome, and we have been beneficiaries of true Tobagonian hospitality, and for that we are very grateful. As mentioned by Mr. Moore, we are conducting this consultation in partnership, in co-hosting with the Division of Finance and Enterprise Development. And I suppose because it's the Division of Finance, they have really helped us out by meeting the financial obligations. So we are really very helpful. Just in the spirit of what is happening today, I would want to encourage you, just as happened with your colleagues in Trinidad, to be very enthusiastic, to give your views, give expression to your thoughts and so on, and to understand that part of what it seems as though in times of having little, we learn to cooperate even more. And my view is that the coming together of the division and the ministry has been a show of that. So if that paves the way for what we are going to do today, I think we are on good ground. So thank you, welcome, and please ensure that you share and give all of your views and be participative. Thank you.
Senator the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus, Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development. Assemblyman Joel Jack, Secretary of Finance and Enterprise Development, Ms. Jennifer Daniel, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Labor, Small Enterprise Development, Mr. Carol Adams, Commissioner of Cooperative Development, other distinguished guests. Let me also recognize the Chief Operations Officer of the Cooperative Credit Union League, Ms. Diane Joseph, our Treasurer, Mr. Richard Beard, and all the other leaders and shareholders of the Cooperative Credit Union movement in Tobago. Let me welcome you and thank you for participating in this critical conversation, a conversation that we anticipate will bring about very, very important results for all of us. We have had 2 very fruitful days in Trinidad over the last 2 weeks. And we are here now in Tobago soliciting your comments and your input into re-engineering a movement that has contributed immensely to the socio-economic development of Trinidad and Tobago. And I could recall last year I came to a function in Tobago hosted by the Bethel Credit Union, and I had the privilege of listening to the assemblyman. And what came out and what was striking is the demographics in Tobago in terms of the structure of the cooperative movement, the credit union movement in particular. Whereas in Trinidad and Tobago there is a plethora of industry-based credit unions, in Tobago it's community-based. And the impact of any legislative change is going to have a different kind of result in Tobago as in Trinidad. And we are mindful of that, and we were very heartened by his comments and his input on that day in terms of saying things that were very supportive of the League's position when we challenged the legislation at that time. And we are comforted in the fact that they have joined with the minister in engaging in this discussion today. We came on board very early when the legislation was introduced, and we felt that it was not working in the best interest of the movement. And there were comments in the media and in the general public that we were reacting very emotionally. And in partnership with TechU Credit Union, we engaged in 2 critical exercises. One would have been a legal review of the legislation, and the second one would have been an impact analysis. And the legal review was done by Mayer and Company Limited, and the impact analysis was done by Curry Consultants, headed by Dr. Ralph Henry. And they vindicated us in terms of the outcome of those studies, which demonstrated that our concerns and our challenges to the legislation were well-founded, and they were on solid grounds, and they were supported by the findings of these 2 studies. We are here today as a result of the work we would have done over the last 2-3 years, challenging the legislation publicly. And every opportunity I get to commend the Tobago comrades for their show of support to the League and to the movement when we challenged the legislation, I would take it. And I could recall, I don't ever forget that day, 10th February 2015, when we decided to, for the first time in my history in the credit union movement, stage public demonstrations against the legislation. And we were heartened by the fact that if we could count 2,000 persons outside Parliament, we had over 900 of those persons would have came from Tobago. They filled the boat and came down. So let me commend the Tobagonians for that effort. They were there before all of us in Trinidad, and it demonstrated that it's very easy to get from Tobago, but very difficult to get from one end of Trinidad to the next. So we want to thank the Tobago cooperators for demonstrating their love for the movement, their passion for the movement, but not just a passion that is driven by emotions, but one that is driven by the hardcore reality that if you tinker with this movement in a way that is not going to be in its best interest, it will have very debilitating impact on the wider society. So we are here today to engage in these discussions. The League and the wider credit union movement have been very supportive, and we want to thank the minister for giving us this opportunity once again to engage in this kind of discussions, one that we hope will bring about a policy for cooperatives, and we say cooperatives without making any distinction between financial or non-financial, because we believe that we need to work together with the non-financial cooperatives. And testimony to that was coming out of the 2 consultations in Trinidad. We have had fruitful discussions with some of the non-financial cooperatives because they would want to work with us in terms of building capacities in the non-financial cooperatives and using their experiences in the non-financial sector to guide us in terms of bridging the gap between the credit unions and those cooperatives that provide a different kind of service. So we are confident we are on the right track. This exercise is one that we commend. We want to give the Minister all commendation for engaging us in this discourse and taking the step, a bold step to engage in this wider stakeholder consultation. And we are confident that coming out of this exercise, we will have a policy driven by input from the shareholders in this movement, and one that will take into consideration the different kind of demographics that exist in Trinidad and Tobago, and the need for us to build the cooperative business model, particularly in the economically challenging times that we are faced with. And the PS said it. You know, we normally socialize when, or we get into socialist kind of tendencies when we have challenges. But when they are boom, we always tend to put the emphasis on a few. We have to change that paradigm in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have to let the cooperative business model be entrenched in our DNA, that it will be one that would resonate throughout the entire society. So once again, let me welcome everyone, and I look forward to engaging the cooperators in Tobago, the shareholders in Tobago, in a fruitful discussion that will allow us to develop a cooperative policy. And then coming out of that, we'll have enabling legislation in the image and likeness of the shareholders of the cooperative credit union movement. Thanks and enjoy the balance of your day.
A pleasant good morning. And please permit me once more to welcome our visitors and friends from Trinidad and Tobago, and to welcome you to the Victor E. Bruce Financial Complex. I understand, Madam Minister, that this is your first official visit to Tobago in your capacity as Minister of Labour and Cooperatives, and I'm delighted that the Division of Finance is your first port of call. And given the synchronicity of our portfolios as it relates to cooperatives, enterprise development, it is indeed appropriate, and I anticipate and I look forward to a harmonious, cordial, and productive working relationship with you, Honorable Minister. But, Madam Minister, I want to start by addressing a statement made by your Permanent Secretary when she said that she enjoyed Tobago's hospitality and the breakfast that we provided. Yes, but our investment here today is not only about Tobago's hospitality, but it's also about Tobago's self-interest and survival, and the survival of the credit union movement, an indigenous institution birthed in Tobago that we are seeking to protect and preserve. So, and I'm heartened that you were able to take care of you. When I came in this morning, I was greeted by the PS smiling and the communication manager. So we still know how to make a good Tobago coconut bake and a good saltfish and so on. But Madam Minister, I think your presence here today serves, and efforts of your ministry serves to ensure Tobago's inclusion at this critical stage of the consultative process as we work towards creating and shaping national policy and a new legislation for the credit union movement. It is my hope that today's discussions are enriching and adequately serve the intended purpose of addressing the peculiar needs of the cooperative and credit union sectors on the island, specifically here in Tobago and Trinidad and Tobago in general. Today's consultation is occurring against the backdrop of severe economic challenges facing our country. I think it's no secret now that the prices of our main export products, oil and gas, have plummeted over the last few months with negative implications for our country's export earnings, its fiscal position, and or balance of payment. It is my view that credit unions and cooperatives have critical roles to play in assisting our country to weather our current economic storm. It is in this specific context that I view today's consultation particularly important and timely as we seek a cooperative and a consultative approach to address the problems that confront us. Ladies and gentlemen, it was only yesterday that I piloted a motion in the Tobago House of Assembly chamber outlining the Assembly's strategy to treat with the 7% reduction in budgetary allocation and expenditure for fiscal 2016. And a point I want to make here is that throughout all the downturns in the economy, 86 to 90 period, and the 2007-2009 financial crisis, the movement has weathered the storm. You have survived through it, and we're looking for the movement to work with us throughout this storm. Ladies and gentlemen, cooperatives and credit unions form critical elements in the financial architecture here in Tobago. Our records from the Cooperative Department unit suggest that in Tobago, there are 115 registered cooperatives, 47 agricultural, 16 service cooperatives, 5 multipurpose cooperatives, and 35 junior co-ops. Also, there are about 12 credit unions and 10 non-indigenous credit unions in Tobago. Our records indicate that in 2015, the 12 indigenous financial credit unions had assets of $347 million, and the 12 non-indigenous financial cooperatives in Tobago had assets of $93 million. What strikes me from these figures is that the credit unions and cooperatives in Tobago, that you both have an asset base which exceeds the annual development program budget of the Tobago House of Assembly. This suggests to me that this sector has tremendous untapped potential, which, if leveraged properly, could significantly impact the island's development. Just last year, the Division of Finance and Enterprise Development commissioned a study to estimate Tobago's GDP for the period 2011-2014. And one of the surprising findings of this study is that the financial services sector is a major contributor to economic activity in Tobago. Indeed, for the year 2014, the financial sector on the island contributed approximately 24% to the island's GDP, almost a quarter. Behind government, the financial sector is the second largest contributor to the island's GDP. And given the critical importance of credit unions in the financial architecture in Tobago, I have no doubt that credit unions would have contributed significantly to the economic activity on the island. Ladies and gentlemen, credit unions and cooperatives have a critical role to play in the diversification of Tobago's economy and the development of an indigenous business class here on the island. In the survey of business establishments, this confirms that for the period 2011, 2014, the services sector is still by and large the dominant sector in Tobago's economy, accounting for approximately 90% of the island's GDP. In addition, the most recent labor force data available from the CSO for Tobago suggests that the state sector employs approximately 60% of the labor force in Tobago, and the private sector 40%. What the data is telling us is that as an island, we still have significant work to do in our continuing quest to diversify and transform the island's economy. The credit unions and cooperatives no doubt can play a significant role in assisting us to foster entrepreneurial activities on the island and thereby diversify the island's economy. Disappointingly, there was a report from a study conducted by Kyrie Consultants on 6 of the major credit unions in Tobago over the period 2009 to 2012. And it suggests that only 6% of the loans disbursed over the last 5-year period was utilized for entrepreneurial activities. The largest loan categories were for vehicles, home construction, and home improvement. And this is something that I would like to see reversed, and as Secretary with responsibility for finance and enterprise development, I want to give my commitment to the movement that we can partner using the existing programs under the Division of Finance to support entrepreneurial activities for your members and persons within the movement. And this is something that we spoke about previously during our last consultation with the Tobago sector, and it's something that I'm really looking forward to, that in the next 12 months or so we'll see a greater working relationship between the Tobago body and the division in ensuring that these numbers are changed significantly. Ladies and gentlemen, beyond their roles in Tobago's Diversification Trust, the movement has a critical role to play in building and strengthening communities. This is important because it is only through community empowerment and participation can we have real and sustainable development. And this is one of the central tenets of the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan for Tobago, the roadmap for Tobago's development. I have a lengthy prepared speech, but I feel I should deviate from it a little. In the interest of time, I think we started late, so and to get the discussions moving. But let me say that what prompted, following my meeting as secretary in 2013 with the Tobago chapter, I think what prompted further meetings and discussions with the movement was the impending legislation. And following the last meeting, joint meeting with the Tobago body and the division and Kyrie Consultants, as we sought to develop and to map out a Tobago's response, a joint Tobago's response to the legislation, one thing came to the fore, is that we need to refine and expand our focus and move it beyond the immediate to develop and design the movement that we would want to see in the next 10, 15, and 20 years. What is the legacy that we will leave for the next generation following our deliberations here this morning? What in the next 20 or 30 years my grandchildren and great-grandchildren making financial decisions, what are we preparing and leaving for them? You might say, well, since you become a father, you start thinking generational. But that is the big question. When we sit today and come up with policy, let us ensure that we leave a lasting legacy that our children and grandchildren and our great-grandchildren can say that mommy and daddy and grandpa and grandma invested their time in a movement, and today we are reaping the benefits and we are the better for it. We have seen savings mobilization, we have seen housing development, we have seen entrepreneurial activities, we are seeing financial planning and retirement planning and a suite of modern financial products, and we are seeing a movement and a cooperative society operating as a modern financial institution that can stand tall in any society, any part of the world. And as I close, I know my communications people will chide me, but as I close, and in the interest of time, please, let us come up with new strategies, new processes, efficient way of doing things, and let us chart and map a course for Tobago's future that can serve and impact and empower generations to come. I thank you this morning.
I just want to open by responding to what Mr. Remy said about the protests against the piece of legislation, the amendment, and where he said that approximately 900 Tobagonians came down, so Tobagonians were in the majority. I would just like to respond and say Tobago always leads the way. That's our history. Tobago always leads the way. I am standing here as a manifestation of Tobago leading the way. Having said that, ladies and gentlemen, a couple of weeks ago, we embarked on a very important journey for the cooperative credit union sector. On January 13th and 14th, we started the consultative process towards the development of a draft national policy on cooperatives and a revised Cooperative Societies Act. As a collective cooperative sector, you control a critical part of this country's economy, and it is therefore imperative that we consult with you on the pertinent issues which directly and indirectly impact upon your sector. In these times when global economies are crumbling under the pressures of falling oil and gas prices, we here in Trinidad and Tobago, we are not immune at all. The warnings for us to tighten our belts and watch our spending have been sounding like a clarion call. As a matter of fact, Mr. Joel Jack would have indicated his 7% reduction, and PS and her team, they were engaged as late as yesterday afternoon in reducing the ministry's expenditure by 7%. And I gather it has reached its destination, Madam PS. Trust, huh? All right. I believe that in times such as these, when our economy is being rocked, we collaborate to proffer solutions on uniting the sector, thereby safeguarding our collective interests. This is what we call cooperative difference. And preserving our legacy is one of the main reasons we have embarked upon this consultative process and have engaged you here today. I am well aware that the Tobago cooperative experience is a unique one. The idiosyncrasies of the Tobago cooperative sector have been well documented by authors such as Dr. Susan Craig James, and more recently in the research of Dr. Ralph Henry and Kyrie Consultant. The evidence clearly suggests that cooperatives have been used as a developmental tool by the people of Tobago. In addition to its evident business characteristic, Tobago cooperatives possess an inimitable village and community trait. This unique feature has sustained the vibrancy of the sector and enhanced the development of other related sectors such as credit, agriculture, agro-processing, taxi services, fishing, land development, hotel and guest house operations. In fact, unlike your Trinidadian counterparts, research by career consultants has illustrated that Tobago cooperatives have excelled in more sectors and are more readily poised to move into value-added activity when compared to your Trinidadian counterparts. With these findings, it was vital to engage you as critical stakeholders. And I must thank Assemblyman Joel Jack for the initiative and taking charge of hosting this consultation. We are indeed grateful. Mr. Jack and myself met, it was last week, and we sat and we discussed how this forum, the format, and the benefits and the outcomes. So I must thank you, Mr. Joel Jack. I have no doubt, ladies and gentlemen, that this consultation would provide us with the building blocks to arrive at solutions to the pertinent issues as we seek a way forward for the sector in Trinidad and Tobago. This consultation provides an ideal opportunity for sharing ideas and promoting information exchange on systems and structures that work best. The emphasis is on innovation, problem solving, and best practices. As we move forward, we must continue to build on the strengths and the innovative thinking that has led to the calculated growth of the cooperative sector. While the challenges are great, this government is confident that the cooperative movement will continue to thrive, and as Minister with responsibility for cooperative development, I am indeed proud of the strides the sector continues to make in spite of the prevalent challenges. And I always seize the opportunity whenever I have it to share with you fellow cooperators that I am a product of the cooperative credit union movement. I think over the past 30 years, I was a member of about 5 credit unions and served at the leadership level of 2, the Rand Credit Union and Public Services Credit Union, so that I understand the whole philosophy that guides the credit union movement. Many of what I own today, I own as a consequence of the credit union, helping me along the way over the years. Cooperatives have a remarkable history of success in the face of adversity, and it is this government's position to ensure this continued success through innovation and unwavering emphasis on safe and sound business practices. The history of this consultative initiative dates back to 2004, when a task force was selected with a mandate to conduct studies and consultation on the cooperative movement. This resulted in the preparation of an interim report that was submitted to Cabinet in December 2005. Subsequently, a revised policy statement entitled Policy for Cooperatives Towards the 21st Century was approved by Cabinet. This was fully anchored on the principles of the International Labour Organization Recommendation 193, which endorsed the promotion of cooperatives and highlighted that government should provide a supportive framework for cooperative development. Preceding this, in July 2005, the government of Trinidad and Tobago agreed on the following. 1, the supervision of the financial activities of all credit unions should be assumed by the Central Bank of Trinidad and Tobago and integrated with the supervision of financial institutions under the Financial Institutions Act of 1993. And 2, the Cooperative Societies Act, Chapter 8103, should be amended to remove the supervision of the financial activities of credit unions from the mandate of the Commissioner for Cooperative Development, while retaining supervision of governance issues and registration. In March 2013, new consultations were held towards the development of new and revised legislation for the sector, which resulted in the development of the Credit Union Bill of 2014 and the Cooperative Societies Amendment Bill of 2014. These bills were tabled in Parliament in November 2014, and of course, the rest is history. Fellow cooperators, as Minister with responsibility for cooperatives, I am here today to ensure that proper, inclusive, and suitable legislation is in place to advance the cooperative movement in a fortified manner. You must have a say in what should govern you. You must be the driving force. The government must not hand down policies to the credit union movement. The credit union has been, over the years, self-regulating itself. However, we do agree that there are governance issues that must be addressed. Legislation is essential to maintain prudent management and also to enhance the fiduciary responsibilities of organizations operating in the financial sector. Even multilateral agencies such as the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are now putting significantly more pressure on government to improve its regulation and governance of both financial and non-financial institutions. Your government is here to ensure that any new legislation will enable the continued growth and expansion of the cooperative sector, particularly for the Tobago economy. Governance is an issue that faces cooperatives both locally and internationally. Since the late 1900s, the concept of corporate governance has been transformed to include the processes, structure, and information used for directing and overseeing the management of any entity. Some institutions may even consider corporate governance to be a set of relationships between a company's management, its board, its shareholders, and other stakeholders. It should be noted, however, that all financial institutions, regardless of size or structure, are expected to operate in a transparent manner, comply with the regulator and prudential standards, and to be held accountable to the public. My fellow cooperators, a lapse in corporate culture and effective governance can be quite devastating to any organization, as reputation capital is not as easily repaired or regained, and the financial cost to the economy may be detrimental. We just have to remember one particular credit union, the Hindu Credit Union, and the point is well made. Therefore, the maintenance of sound corporate governance processes and structure at every level of our society is imperative for the continued well-being of our economy. The Cooperative Development Division records show the total assets of the local cooperative sector are valued at over $11.5 billion TT from 310 active cooperative societies, with a membership of the sector standing at over 530,000 persons. Tobago's contribution to these overall figures, over $310 million in assets from 10 active credit unions, 70 non-financial cooperatives, and 7 junior cooperatives. These statistics show that even though the financial and ensuing economic challenges, which usually translate into negative consequences for the majority of enterprises in the financial sector, cooperatives continue to grow. I commend you, Tobago. I commend you in that regard. And given in the interest of time, I shall do likewise like Mr. Jack and go to the ending of my presentation. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, the cooperative sector continues to exist as a valuable vehicle for employment generation, poverty alleviation, and social integration. The government, in pursuit of these goals, continues to promote the cooperative's ethos in its development strategies and remains dedicated to the development of strong and viable cooperatives. It is to this end that I encourage the sector to continue to create paths for groups and individuals in the society to improve their standard of living and foster the philosophy of cooperatives within their business ventures. As a matter of fact, Mr. Jack, the new chairman of NETCO, Mr. Clary Ben, the Tobago representative on NETCO, Mrs. Marjorie Moore Carrington, and myself, we would be having discussions, a working lunch really, to engage in discussions regarding the strengthening of small businesses in Tobago. So that I do look forward to our discussions a little later, Mr. Jack. Ladies and gentlemen, this consultation is seeking to effectively address your needs as a sector and the many issues which you have divulged in the period before this consultation and those which have been captured in this session. Consensus building is now the key to unlocking the vast potential of the sector as we move forward together, not one behind the other, but together. I continue to emphasize the need for your valuable contributions and look forward to a productive session at the end of the discussions. And I am sorry that I will have to run away as soon as I close my presentation because I would not want to keep the Chief Secretary waiting. So I thank you all very much for being here. May God continue to bless all of you. May God bless our Honorable Prime Minister. May God bless the Leader of the Opposition. May God bless our President. And may God bless us all. Thank you very much.
We have heard some nice words expressed both by your Assemblyman of Tobago, Mr. Joel Jack, the Secretary of Finance and Enterprise Development, as well as a very thought-provoking address by the Senator, the Honorable Jennifer Baptiste Primus. And I certainly would follow in their footsteps, or hope to follow in their footsteps during my presentation this morning. I will be speaking on the issue of the review of the Trinidad consultation, yes, but I certainly will throw out some ideas for discussion when you consider the area of what you want to see in Tobago for the cooperative policy and for the legislation for cooperatives. Okay, it's okay. Last week, or 2 weeks ago, we had a 2-day consultation looking at the cooperative policy and the cooperative legislation. During those 2 days, we received presentations from Dr. Henry from Kyrie Consultants on the impact analysis of the legislation. Additionally, Mr. Henry spoke on the philosophical underpinnings of cooperatives, the history of cooperatives in Trinidad and Tobago, the issues with the legislation, and also the ability of credit unions to meet and treat with the prudential criteria as identified under the PERS ratios. Yes? On the second day, Ms. Lucille Mayer of Mayer & Company spoke about the impact review of the legislation, raising the issues involved in the legislation as to how it will affect the fit and proper issues of directors, as well as the issue of legislation with respect to terms of office. And she raised a critical new issue for discussion, the issue of a cooperative authority. And I know my colleague, Ms. Bundu, when she does her presentation after lunch, will much more delve into that. But during those 2 days as well, the sector in Trinidad came up with ideas and recommendations to address the way forward for the cooperative policy and for cooperative legislation. It is not my intention to tell you what they said to affect your discussions today, but certainly I will want to raise the issues now so that when you could do your discussions shortly and after lunch, you'll have an idea as to what we need to address before we proceed. Today, I want to take you through the ILO Recommendation 193 briefly, the United Nations Development Program briefly, the 2005 Cooperative Policy, and as I mentioned, the policy issues and the legislation issues. The ILO, they recommended through their Recommendation 193 in 2002, that's 14 years ago, a recommendation for cooperatives. And it's so very relevant today in Trinidad and Tobago. The definition states it is recognized that cooperatives operate in all sectors of this economy, and the recommendation applies to all types and forms of cooperatives. Here in Tobago, I know from my research and from my supervision of the sector that we have housing cooperatives, we have junior cooperatives, fishing and agricultural cooperatives, we have cocoa cooperatives, we have tourism cooperatives. As a matter of fact, if you take a look and you venture in the name of the small recreation clubs at any of our beaches here in Tobago, you see that they're all managed by cooperatives. Have a look at the club at Mount Irving, even at Pigeon Point, where you buy your refreshments. When you go to Charlottesville, and there are two others, and they're all managed by cooperatives, tourism-type cooperatives. And we also have gas station cooperatives in Trinidad. And we have the taxi co-op in Tobago, and we also have two like that in Trinidad, St. Christopher's and St. Anthony's. So we are throughout the sectors in the economy. And of course, we have the credit unions, I can't forget that. So the ILO recommendation is speaking to strengthening and mobilizing and ensuring the viability of all these cooperatives operating in all these sectors. And where in sectors we don't have any present cooperatives, and I throw the idea here of health cooperatives, community care cooperatives, employee-type cooperatives where we can keep our young kids managed by us through cooperatives, as an idea of other cooperatives which could get involved in. And the objectives of the ILO recommendation, again, which is still relevant today, measures should be adopted to strengthen cooperatives irrespective of their level of development. You may have small cooperatives just formed last year, and you have cooperatives like the RAND and the public services and so forth, over 50 and 60 years old. So across the spectrum, what we are saying is that measures should be adopted to strengthen these cooperatives. And you ask yourself, what are these measures? We know about them, we talk about them a lot, but do we practice these measures? And let me show out some of them to you. Do we train our leaders, our directors, our committee members? Do we train our membership? And do we continuously train them to meet the ongoing demands of the world and the sector we operate in? Yes, I heard my colleague, Ms. Diane Joseph, on the radio this morning, I-95.5. I always listen to her every Friday morning, and you should always do so. That she spoke about with the economy the way it is today now, that what the credit union sector could do to strengthen the individual member out there. And we're speaking here about the entrepreneurial development of your members. Other measures which, again, you speak to a lot all the time. Your fit and proper guidelines, your procedures, your policies, and your practices. Your good governance. We need to strengthen our cooperative sector by having prudent management and following our fiduciary responsibilities. More than that, if we want to strengthen our sector, what are the areas of funding we can provide for the sector? Yes, the credit union sector is mobilized to the value of billions of dollars. We keep saying that all the time. But what about the funding for the non-financial cooperatives, which in a sense make up the larger amount of cooperatives, if you go by the numbers? Because we say we have 346 cooperatives in Trinidad and Tobago, yet we only have 129 credit unions. Do the maths. Do the maths. So how can you, the financial credit unions who are here today, assist those other non-financial cooperatives? And you may say, yes, We can give money left, right, and center, just like that. It's not our money, it's the membership money. And I agree with you. But reach out to your brothers and sisters and strengthen their systems, procedures, their fit and proper, their governance areas, so that they could be developed. We also speak about the level of financial reporting. How can we as a sector grow if we don't always financially report on time? Yes? And speaking as a commission, I can tell you, for one reason or another, sometimes you don't always meet that mandate to do your financial statements on time. So I reiterate today, let's get serious, people. Let's do our financial audits on time, and let's do our PERS ratios for the credit unions. I know some of you have an issue with the ratios, you might feel not applicable to Trinidad and Tobago. But that is the case. Do your own financial ratios, which you have done in secondary school. No financial ratios, liquidity ratios, earning ratios. If you don't want to follow PERS, at least follow that. So you will have a sense of assessing where you are in a financial perspective. With respect to the non-financial cooperatives, you might ask yourself, well, what kind of ratios could they follow? But we have been, my office, we have been doing research internationally to see what sort of ratios we could set up for financial, non-financial cooperatives to operate under so they could properly assess themselves across the board. The role of governments. The minister spoke quite well on the role of government, because the government sets policy, but we don't want the policy to be top-down, as she was saying. We want it to go up. So whatever you decide today, and what we spoke to past in Trinidad, to ensure what you say is heard by the government, so they will not sit down in cabinet and prepare a policy that nobody knows nothing about. All right? So we want a balanced society with strong public, private, and cooperative sectors. That's the ideal recommendation, the role of government. So the government has to provide that spectrum and that background to enable the growth of the cooperative sector to meet and match the private and cooperative sectors. For example, if it is that the asset base of the credit unions is $15 million, all well and good. But when you compare that to all the other financial systems out there, the banks, etc., that boils down to how much percentage? 2%? 3% at most? And yet, I'm speaking to cooperators here amongst us, and yet, persons out there don't want to see that 3%. They want to push it down even further. So, the role of government has to be to support that 3% and make sure it grows and be sustained. We have to provide for the adoption of measures for the oversight of cooperatives. How can you assist the regulator to provide the services to deal with and treat with the cooperative sector? So we're speaking of adopting legislation and regulations which are guided, and I slow down here, are guided by the cooperative values and the cooperative principles. You know? Okay? So my idea today is not to speak to the values and principles. If I ask you what are they, I know I'll have all the up at one time and battle it off one time. But we're saying that our legislation has to be founded on the values and principles. And when we're in Trinidad, we discussed this at length. Last week as well, 2 weeks ago as well, I also threw the idea of the Sustainable Development Goals. This follows up on what we had in the Millennium Goals for 2015. The Sustainable Development Goals go into 2020 and beyond. And there are 17 sustainable goals. And one of the goals, goal number 8, speaks to promoting sustained, inclusive, and sustainable economic growth, full and productive employment, and decent work for all. Cooperators, this falls in the lap of the Ministry of Small Enterprise Development and the lap of the Division of Finance Enterprise Development. So we are guided by this to set apart our strategy, as Mr. Georgiak was saying, our strategy for the next 10 years and beyond. We have it there. The UN have guided us, so we are putting things in place now to make this happen. So we're speaking about entrepreneurship and development. That's what we will do. Coming out of this goal, the UN identified 12 targets. And briefly, I spoke to just 2 of them this morning. And again, this was mentioned in Trinidad as well. To promote the development-oriented policies that support productive activities, meaning your non-financial cooperatives, as well as your credit unions being involved in granting loans to members, not just for house and car and travel, but for entrepreneurial development, for creativity and innovation, and to encourage the formalization